like about Bitcoin is be your own bank, no middlemen. Miners and stakers are middlemen if you're a transactor. And so the question that I like people to ask themselves is, whose problem is the system supposed to solve? And an analogy I sometimes use is eBay. Like, I think if I asked you whose problem does eBay solve, I hope you would say, well, people who want to buy things and people who want to sell things, and they have cost associated with finding each other and making payments work, and the cost of like reputation, and eBay makes all that easier for them. And that's the answer that I like. The answer I don't like is eBay solves a problem for eBay stakeholders, where they want to reduce the friction between buyer and sellers a little bit, but not too much, so that the residual friction that they leave enriches them. Because every dollar that eBay stockholders make is a dollar that a buyer had to pay, but that a seller didn't get. And transaction fees are the same thing. People measure like the growth of the Ethereum ecosystem by the total transaction fees paid, but that's friction left in the system. That's bad, right? Like, if the pitch is Ethereum reduces the friction associated in these smart contracts, transaction fees are friction that's still left. And proof of work and proof of stake are always going to have this residual friction. The system that we came up with for the XRP ledger is very radical because it doesn't have in-system on-chain incentives. The idea is, if everybody wants the double spend problem solved, they can solve it essentially by gossiping with each other in this formal way. And the only problem that you have, the only thing that can break that system, is if you have a million jerks who just refuse to who just like alternate between yes and no, who refuse to cooperate. And you need some way to sort of reduce the number of uncooperative jerks. And that's what the unique node list does. It's a list of sort of people you're willing to listen to resolve the double spend problem. It doesn't, if the sort of pitch that you like about Bitcoin is be your own bank.
Counting days Ripple.
Yeah, at that time, so that was probably mid to late 2011. Sort of two cracks were emerging in the Bitcoin narrative, such as it was at the time. Obviously, the narrative was, most of the people were technical enthusiasts. They were very interested in the technological end, and they weren't as savvy about like how to drive adoption. The only strategy that anyone could think of was a grassroots strategy. And that's not how the internet got adopted, right? The internet was adopted by government and military first. So it's a and that's not how the internet got adopted, right? The internet was adopted by government and military first. Kind of the very earliest focus, and I think that kind of matured between 2011 and 2014, this kind of focus of like, we really need to solve payments. Like, and if you think about any other use case, you think about an NFT. Well, I want to buy it and I want to sell it. Think about a loan. Well, I want to pay the loan back. And I want to get paid like the amount of money I borrowed. Like, all of these other use cases need great payments. And so we just sort of laser focused in on payments. And I think the other thing that we did different from the very earliest days was everybody else, including us in the beginning, had this ground up strategy. Like, if you don't have a strategy, your strategy is get everybody to use the thing that I think is great. And I think a lot of companies are still pursuing that. But I think there's also a sort of top down strategy. And that's kind of what the internet did. Like, the internet got governments to adopt it. They got universities. They got sort of big players. And so we decided, what are the biggest players? They're banks. And we went after banks. We probably should have aimed a little bit lower than that. The problem with banks is obviously, like, banks are a big deal. Like, any crypto partnership with a bank is a big deal. But the problem is banks are slow moving, and they're not. And the bigger they are, the less interested they are in innovation. The very biggest banks talk about how important innovation is, but really, if they could push pause on technology, they would. Why? Right? Why would they not want to freeze time where they're now like right at the top? And so aiming just a little bit lower. You have companies like non-bank financial institutions, payment service providers. These are companies that have the resources to make a big difference. Like, scoring one of them using a cryptocurrency-based system matters. It's not like, you don't have to get thousands and thousands of them.
I mean, every year there's just so much more happening, right? It's certainly not resting on your laurels, and I cannot wait to see the things that you personally, as well as, Ripple overall, continue to build to help this industry grow. And for it to flourish. So thank you so much for spending the time.
Thanks. It was a pleasure talking to you. And, that ending is not written yet. If regulators step in and so all that we're fighting over is the past, then that's going to be a much better place for innovation in the United States. So fingers crossed.